Please welcome to the stage Axios senior politics reporter Eugene Scott.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the first New Shapers event of 2023. We've got some exciting voices here to share their ideas and their vision for the upcoming congressional leadership session with you all, and we hope you enjoy this time. So first, we're going to bring to the stage South Carolina's own Congressman Jim Clyburn. So good to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Hope you are.
I am doing great as well. It's early, but not too early, and I'm so thankful you could join us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so what's it like being back in Washington in a very different position than you were this time last year?
Well, it's a little bit like the way it was about 6 years ago.
Okay.
When I was in the same position. But you are, politics ebbs and flows, and you get used to that. And I'm sort of used to being in the minority and trying to work with the other side to get things done. I do that when I'm in the majority. Okay. So it won't be a big difference for me, except that I won't be driving or helping to drive the agenda.
Okay. Well, you're helping drive it a little bit just in the minority. Can you talk a bit about how you see your new role in leadership?
Well, being assistant leader means that you are the assistant leader, and you tend to do what you can to help support the program set forth by the leader. I've been given the responsibility thus far of the faith working group that I've been working with for some time now. And it is trying to get Democrats comfortable with dealing with issues of faith. As you know, there's a pretty strong and very bright line between faith and politics, and it should not be. And a lot of Democrats are pretty uncomfortable with dealing with faith issues. But I grew up in a parsonage. My father was a very activist minister. I grew up in the quote unquote civil rights activities, and they are sort of church-based. But what a lot of people don't seem to understand, but when it comes to the African American community, education is church-based. Mm-hmm. The states did not educate blacks. In fact, it was illegal for black people to get an education. So the churches did it. My mother, I'm 82 years old. My first experience with school was in my mother's kindergarten.
Okay.
My mother had a kindergarten when I was 4 years old in our church. So this is very comfortable with me. And so I have had pretty good success getting Democrats to get beyond this broad, bright line of separating church and state.
We know faith and values play a role in lots of people's politics and their worldview in terms of what they think matters and what needs to be focused on. What are some of the issues you think in this next Congress really deserve your attention?
Well, I think that we've got to get back to the basics of what made this country great. When I was a student, I studied Alexis de Tocqueville. Tocqueville wrote a 2-volume work called Democracy in America way back in the 1830s. Tocqueville came to this country to study our penal system, but when he got here, he saw something that he said was magical about this country. And they went around trying to find the source of that magic. He came to the conclusion that America's greatness is not that it's more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because she has always been able to repair her faults. And if we did not learn anything from COVID-19, we saw some fault lines open up in this country. They were there for a long, long time, but they were exposed in such a way that we have to go about correcting all of that. So I think the new Congress has got to work on rebuilding our economy, as President Biden says, from the bottom up and from the middle out. We have drifted too far from that, it seems to me. And we have to get back to those basic things that make people real, flourishing Americans, and that is get them educated, get them housed, and provide them with a way to make a living.
How do you communicate to your base that this is something that Democrats are prioritizing? Because your GOP critics would say that specifically when it comes to the economy, this is not something the left has handled well.
Well, that's their line. But the fact of the matter is, if you go back through history, and I take people straight to the facts. You know, when you hear all the stuff about theory, theory is to be studied on college campuses. We have to deal with the facts, and the facts are the times that this economy in this country really flourished, it's been under Democrats. Let's go back and look at it. We looked at Biden's programs, and everybody's talking about this is historical. No. Go back to 1965, Lyndon Johnson, when people look at what we did. Social Security, they came under a Democrat, Franklin Roosevelt. Truman tried to get Medicare, couldn't do it. The Democrat did it. Affordable Care Act, a Democrat, Obama. So you go through history. We talk about Roosevelt, we talk about Johnson, we talk about Obama, now Biden. This is the most productive administration, first 2 years, than any administration since Lyndon Johnson. And so the facts are there. And so when people come to me with that foolishness, I just take them right to the facts and then ask them to dispute them.
What's a fact that happened in these first 2 years that you think doesn't get enough attention?
Well, what we did to fix the educational pursuits in the country, when Joe Biden came into office, student debt was killing educational processes, killing students, preventing the economy from getting up. If you come out of college with a $200,000 debt, you ain't gonna buy a house. You ain't gonna buy cars. You're gonna try to get out of debt. What we did just with student loan debt is remarkable. The program was there. The previous administration refused to implement it and even tried to eliminate it. But when you look at what we did, it was remarkable. Look at what we did with HBCUs. The $6 billion in capital debt wiped off the books so these schools could come out of COVID and educate people. If you're coming out of COVID and got to pay off $6 billion in debt, and you've gone a year and a half without any students on the campuses, that's remarkable. I'm just focusing on HBCUs because that's where we started. But we did the same thing for all educational institutions. And so I think that that was remarkable. Then we created the so-called rescue plan, and look what it did. And I don't think people spend enough attention on that. Everywhere I go, I tell mayors and council people, go back and look at the rescue plan and what we did. I got a call last week from the governor of South Carolina, who is the biggest Trumper among the governors. We are good buddies, great friends. Our politics are miles apart. But on January 6th, when we were all in the so-called undisclosed location, the very first phone call I got was from Henry McMaster and wanted to know if I was all right. Then he said to me, I'm going to have my State of the State address tomorrow. I'm going to be pushing this is his quote, your broadband program. He calls me and he says, look, I want to build out 100%. I want every residence, every business in South Carolina to be connected to the internet. Will you join me in that? Now we're going to do 100%. And he called me last week and says, I'm getting ready to put another $140 million in the broadband program, your broadband program, he calls it. Come and stand with me to make the announcement. So that's a big thing. And I asked him, I said, well, where are you getting all this money? He said, well, I'm getting $100 million. We need $650 million, he said. I'm getting $100 million from the infrastructure bill, where the big broadband thing is. I said, that's just $100 million. So where the others come from? He was, I'm going to get $100 million from the auctions coming from FCC. Then I've asked the state to put in $50 million. I said, that's $250. Let's keep going. He said, I'm getting $400 million from the rescue plan. He said, what y'all did with the rescue plan allows me to use $400 million of that to build out 100% of broadband. And I tell that to mayors and governors, they didn't do that with the rescue plan. So a lot of people now are rushing back to look at that. So the biggest thing we did was not the infrastructure bill, it was the rescue plan. And then after that, we did the CHIPS and Science Act, and then we did the Inflation Reduction Act. My late wife battled diabetes for 30 years. And I saw her bills, $800 a month, some months $1,200. She was a full shot a day diabetic. When you cap insulin for senior citizens at $35 a month, my goodness, you have just reduced inflationary issues in that household dramatically. Now, Democrats try to do it for everybody. Insulin has been around for 100 years. You can make it, package it, and sell it for $10 a month. So why are they paying $800 a month? So these are the kinds of things that we've done. Then we went and did the PAC Act to go back and pick up those veterans. We didn't just look at, everybody was focusing on Afghanistan and Iraq. We saw what happened to soldiers coming back from the Vietnam War. And a lot of soldiers that came out of Vietnam were getting 30% disability, and they should have been getting 90 and 100. We went back with the PAC Act and picked them up. I'm out in Iowa and talking about the PAC Act. And there was a gentleman sitting on the front seat, and I noticed that he had a strange look on his face. When I left the church, I walked by him just to speak to him because I saw. So he says, this past week, when y'all passed that bill, I went back to my Veterans Administration office, and my 35% went up to 100%, my disability. So these are the things we did that nobody talks about. And so we've done some remarkable things. A lot of people say folks on the Safer Communities Act, but I ask people to look at the PAC Act and see what we did. Look at Inflation Reduction, not just the title, but dig into the program and see what's there. So we've done some remarkable things for 2 years, and I think that people go that's what Joe Biden is doing now. He's running around and he's going to Baltimore to look at whatever they did over in Baltimore, going up to New York to look at that tunnel that I've gotten lost in I don't know how many times, and fixing all of that. Went out to Kentucky with Mitch McConnell at that bridge that people have been talking about for 75 years, fix that. All of this, we are going to be implementing this year, and I'm saying to people that Joe Biden has earned another term.
So one thing that you all were not able to get across the line to the degree that you would hope is police reform.
Absolutely.
And this is something that obviously is on the minds of so many Americans given the recent tragedy in Memphis. Are you meeting with the president tomorrow with the rest of the black lawmakers?
I don't know. The chair, I've talked to the chair of the caucus. Steve Horsford is a great young man, our new chair. We talked twice last night. We had a long meeting last night. I am working with him. I'll go to any meeting he asked me to go to. I don't know, the staff hadn't told me whether or not I'm going to that meeting tomorrow or not.
So if you do go, what do you all plan to talk about? I mean, how do you get this House to pass what they did not support in the Senate when Democrats were in control of the House?
Well, remember, this House is just flip numbers. This 222 the Republicans got is the 222 we had, and I was the majority whip.
Right.
We did not miss passing a single bill. Now, you look at the results of the election, about 11 of the Republicans who won 6 or 7 of them did not expect to win. I don't think even they expected to win. And they end up winning. Look what happened up in New York. They were not supposed to win those seats in New York. But we had some problems going with redistricting, and we had problems going with our gubernatorial ticket that kept going down, down, down. And all of a sudden, we got into this difficulty. Well, those districts, they're going to have to run in the next time. So if we can get it across the finish line in the Senate, because that's where it stopped the last time, and it's going to start there this time. And I talked with Scott, your cousin. I talked with Tim.
Not actually my cousin, but it's possible.
But it may be. I'm from the South, and I'm going to tell you, you just don't know.
I was going to say, all our Scots, we're from North Carolina, so you have it clear. Yeah.
So what? I talked with Tim yesterday morning. He's had 2 meetings yesterday with Booker, and he's going to meet with Steve Horsford, I think, today. And we are hopeful that they can get something done. I got a text last night from my sheriff, Leon Lott, who said to me that he was on his way to a sheriff's meeting, and just want you to know we are going to have a discussion on this whole issue of immunity. Because that's the big sticking point.
Right.
So if they get it done in the Senate and the Senate does it in the House, I think we'll pass it in the House, because I think that those seats that I just talked about will be compelled to support.
This is an issue that you've seen up close as an activist in your younger days, and now as a lawmaker. What pieces of this conversation continue to frustrate you most when it comes to police reform?
I think this whole issue of people not wanting to have things in place to keep people accountable. There are things in place. We have ethics laws for politicians. We've got whatever we call the laws for lawyers. You can get this bar, they have things that they do. We've got ways to deal with doctors. So why is it that we cannot deal with police officers? Every police officer is not a good police officer. My father was a minister. One of the first memories I have in our household, my dad was president of the Presbytery of our church. The first meeting I can remember ever observing, though he didn't know I was observing it, they were talking about defrocking the minister, which they did. Now, they didn't burn down the church or dispense with the congregation. They got rid of the minister. So nobody want to get rid of policing. We want to get rid of these bad cops. And to protect bad cops is just out. It's just beyond the pale with me. I don't understand why you got to protect these guys. You go problem after problem after problem in this jurisdiction, and because you got this thing, you can't put them on this registry. They go down the street and get the same job someplace else and start doing the same stuff. That should not be, and that frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah. What should we be thinking about in terms of 2024 and the Democratic strategy to maintain the White House, to take back the House? What will some of you all's focuses be?
We will focus on people's lives. As I said to Joe Biden back when he was candidate Biden, trying to run president, a lot of people focus on all the discussion we had about having a black woman on the Supreme Court. A lot of people thought that would backfire, but it didn't.
It did not.
It did not backfire. And the reason I knew it would not backfire is because I have 3 daughters.
Okay.
And they told me what was going on. There's 11 years between my oldest and my youngest. So I got 3 daughters, and they're living in 2 generations, quite frankly. And so I knew that was it. But that wasn't the biggest thing I said to him. I said to him that night, I said, let me tell you something. You're in on the Senate floor. You're out here campaigning. You have got to say directly to people, here is what this policy that I'm proposing will do for you. Here is what it will do for your family. And here's what it will do for your community. And then stop talking. And that's what we've got to do. And that's what we will do. We will put people over politics day in and day out. Here is what Democrats are planning to do for you. Here's what we are doing for your family. Here's what we're doing for your community. And all this cultural stuff that you were talking about is just poppycock, and we're not going to get hooked up in that.
You mentioned your conversation with the president going to 2020. Have you all talked about South Carolina and the primary possibly becoming the first?
I understand that the meeting about that is going to take place this weekend up in Philadelphia. I'll go up there to make the case as to why South Carolina should be in the window. It was not my decision. I did not ask the president about making South Carolina first. You know, as I said, I grew up in the Boston, so biblical teachings are big with me. And I remember one scripture that says, the last shall be first. And so I wanted to be last in the window because for the last several years, we've come out first on election day. Mm-hmm. Go back and ask Obama. He got beaten up bad in New Hampshire. He came to South Carolina. Mm-hmm. We resurrected him, and he went on to the presidency. Joe Biden lost, fifth in New Hampshire, fourth in Iowa, distant second in Nevada. He came to South Carolina. We resurrected him, and he's now president. I wanted to stay in the resurrection mode, but...
What do you think it is about South Carolina? We always hear its diversity compared to New Hampshire or Iowa that has been so effective in resurrecting political careers.
I'm really glad you asked me that question. I think you may be the first person to ever really ask me that. It is very clear. South Carolina is a relatively small state. We have 7 congresspeople. South Carolina has 4 distinct cultural, economic cultures. If you go to the PD of South Carolina, it's agriculture. You go up to the Piedmont of South Carolina, Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson, Pickens, and Coney, it is manufacturing. You're down the Midlands of South Carolina, Columbia is where our educational institutions are. You go down to the low country, down at Charleston, you've got the distinct Gullah Geechee culture that was based, basically, is now tourism, and it used to be military. South Carolina is home for the 9th Air Force, home for the 3rd Army. It's home for the headquarters of the Charleston military lift base. So you got these cultures there. So you can come to South Carolina and you got a relatively cheap media market, and you expose yourself to all of these. And if you learn how to communicate with the people of the PD, then you're going to do fine in the Midwest. If you learn how to communicate with the people there in the Piedmont or in the Midlands, you will do well. That is what it is. And it's on both sides. McCain was riding high, about to be the nominee, until he got to South Carolina. W beat him in South Carolina, and who became president? George W. Bush. So it's not just the Democrats. It is what that state is all about, and it's been that way. I'm working on my 3rd book now, and this book is really going to be about what I'm talking about here. A lot of times people introduce me as the first black to do this and the first black to do that. And even when it comes to the Congress, I'm the 9th black person from South Carolina to serve in the United States Congress. At one point in our history, in the 42nd Congress, South Carolina had 4 Congress people. 3 of them were black. You know, people don't know that. And so I'm going to expose people to what really makes South Carolina tick. And this whole stuff about having your presidential election influenced by a state or states that do not reflect what this country is all about and the makeup of this country will expose you to the possibility of failure. And that's what has happened to us.
It has, and I appreciate you coming to share so much of that with us today. I hope we can get you back here early another time later in the year.
Another time, maybe not as early.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, Congressman,
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Yes, sir. Okay.
And now introducing Axios political reporter Alexi McCammond.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alexi McCammond, a national political reporter with Axios. Let's give it up for Eugene Scott, who just joined Axios like 3 weeks ago and is crushing it, hosting our events. Love having him with us. Our next guest is Congresswoman Nanette Barragan from California. She's the newly minted chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, so she'll help us get into all the details about Democrats' policy priorities now that they're in the minority and how they plan to work with Republicans ahead of 2024. So please help me in welcoming Congresswoman Barragan. Hi, thank you for joining us. Good to see you. Well, I appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for inviting.
I'd just like to start the conversation with what happened in Memphis with Tyree Nichols. I think a lot of folks are looking at this moment and wondering why it would be different in terms of legislation coming out of Washington. Could you just help us understand why Americans should be more hopeful that Democrats will be able to pass some sort of police reform or gun reform after the horrific mass shootings in California, now that you all are in the minority?
Well, I mean, I think the first positive is you're seeing the Congressional Black Caucus going to the White House, going to meet with the president on this, have a president who's committed to doing this. And we've seen, I think, some conversations about, Senator Tim Scott coming back to the table. So, you have to be hopeful, and you have to be hopeful in this line of business because you ask, when is enough enough? When are we going to stop and make sure we act? And so I think everybody saw the horrific, video, and if you didn't, you don't have to watch it because it is so horrific to see. But to see, black and brown men unarmed be afraid to even drive and have a traffic stop is not the kind of world we should live in. So I have to just remain optimistic and hope that we have some players that are willing to come to the table to protect society and have some reform and some changes.
And I would have to ask the same about a different issue, which of course is immigration. As I mentioned, you're the new chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, but of course those members are not the only ones who should be talking about immigration or thinking through what that legislation might look like or making those deals. I am curious, though, what your conversations have been like thus far within the CHC, but also perhaps with other members, maybe even across the aisle.
So this is something the Hispanic Caucus has been championing for a long time. A lot of the politics, of course, is what gets in the way. What's happening, the news of the day. Now it's conversations about we won't do anything unless we do something about the border. They're two separate things. The border and immigration are two separate things, and so when you mix them up, it becomes so much more political. We see that happening even with Dreamers, where you had an issue that was bipartisan that both parties said they wanted to do, and then one party holds it hostage. And that happens not just on immigration, but on other issues. It's very frustrating. I can tell you, just yesterday, I did approach a colleague of mine across the aisle and talked about, hey, where can we work together? Let's get together to see where we have some common ground. And we know that there's opportunity for this. Because if you take a look, in my first term when I got elected in 2016, we were in the minority. And what happened? We had some criminal justice reform. Now, did it go far enough that we wanted on our side of the aisle? No. But was it some progress? Absolutely. That was something Hakeem Jeffries led with. And so I do think there's opportunity, but it does make it harder when you have it more politicized. And immigration is one of the hot topics that is very controversial. Even when I was sitting on Homeland Security, when you talked about security and cybersecurity, no problem. As soon as you got to the border, it became a talking point. It was theater on television. Behind the scenes, a very different conversation. And what's also frustrating is when you have your colleagues across the aisle tell you these stories, about their very own home, and what they've brought people in who are immigrants and how much they love them, but they can't do that because they're in a red district, and they would have a lot of heat for it. So that's very frustrating. But we have to just continue to work to move toward comprehensive immigration reform, which is, I think, the first step in finding those legal pathways to citizenship. So there's a lot of work to do, and it's going to be more challenging when you have a minority, when you're in the minority in the House. There's no doubt about that.
I appreciate the point about how politicized it has become, especially when you bring up the border. I do wonder whether you support at all your House Republican colleagues' intention to investigate the situation at the southern border, the Biden administration's handling of immigration.
So, look, I served as the chair of the Border Sub on Homeland in the last Congress, and we had hearings about that. We brought in officials. We've been down there plenty times. And so when you take a look at the numbers, you have to see like the chart over the course of some 25 years. This has been an ongoing challenge under multiple presidents, including under the Trump administration. So to just basically say, oh, well, this is an issue now, is really taking something that's not true and putting it out there. But we have people who are coming across right now, in particular, are coming from, societies like Nicaragua and Venezuela and, Cuba. So these are regimes that are those that are trying to escape authoritarian dictatorships. And historically, we've been very accepting. So I think it's looking at who's coming over. Are we America has this tradition of being a nation of immigrants, being welcoming to those from regimes like this. So we have to have a better humane system. Part of that is processing. Part of that is immigration judges and making sure we're investing. Let's not also forget, under the prior administration, there was a complete I'm trying to think on how best to put this, just dismantling of the immigration system and saying, hey, we're just going to close it down and we're just going to put up a wall. And that didn't fix the problem. It didn't get any better. And if you take a look at the numbers on the money going into the border, the apprehensions and where the numbers came, and the recidivism that came back for people coming across, it wasn't much better.
And how closely are you working with the White House and the president on this issue? What type of partners have they been? And did the White House give you a heads up and the CHC a heads up before the president made a visit to the border?
Well, we have conversations with the White House. Sometimes we like to be consulted in advance as opposed to notified, and I think that's the difference. And this is something that we're having an ongoing conversation with the White House about. Look, we're the Hispanic Caucus. We are the premier organization that's leading on this issue. Many of us have family members who are immigrants. My mom was an immigrant. She came from Mexico. She finished the 3rd grade, right? It was about opportunity. It was about giving us something she didn't have. And if you think about it now, when she was crossing that border, some 40, 50 years ago, would she ever imagine her child could become a member of Congress? I mean, you see now, even dreamers. There are doctors and our teachers and there are neighbors. And so just to put a negative mark on somebody because they're immigrants is not what this country is about, and I hope that we can go back to that. And, speaking of, I saw a tweet go up by one of my Republican colleagues saying if you put an anti-immigration bill, he's going to be a no on the debt ceiling, right? So I think there are people who are willing to say, look, we are not going to stand here and just let you spend the next 2 years doing everything you can to just talk about any anti-immigration legislation we could see. And of course, we're seeing that already happening.
So were you surprised when the White House didn't consult the CHC then about the visit?
I think it's that wasn't about the visit. What I was referring to was the announcement of the new policies at the border. But they do tell us in advance the president's going to be going to the border. I'm not sure there's much consultation that's needed there. They're not going to come to us and say, hey, is it okay if the president goes? So I'm talking more on the larger scale of policy.
Mm-hmm. And what grade would you give the Biden administration so far for their handling of immigration?
Well, geez, everything's relative, I think, too. You know, when you inherit a broken system, I don't really think that's a fair thing to do. So, look, at the end of the day, this is not about putting a grade on anything and how somebody's doing. This is about and this is the responsibility of Congress. This is Congress's responsibility. It's really about House and Senate coming together and saying, it's time. We haven't done anything. You know, Ronald Reagan opened the door, you know, to allowing folks to have that pathway of citizenship. So the party's definitely changed. The politicization has made it more challenging as well. But I do think there is opportunity, and we just have to find those opportunities and those moments. And, you know, it may not be on immigration, it may be on other issues, because there is opportunity to work across the aisle. We saw that, we've seen that happen. I saw that happen in the minority, when I was in the minority.
I want to ask quickly about that in a second, but let's say, and I appreciate your optimism and hope that something will get done legislatively. Let's say the two parties can't come together and pass something through Congress.
Yeah.
Are there any types of executive orders that you think could be particularly helpful or that you've discussed with the president in that case?
Well, you know, in the last Congress, we did have conversations with the president about areas that he can, where there was opportunity for him to do executive orders. But we've seen all of those being challenged, even down to, you know, DACA recipients. So we'll continue to work with the president to see where those can be done, and you know, just seeing where we can get. This is a big priority for the Hispanic caucus, and it's not just our caucus. I think there's an effort and a feeling across the board that it's time to get something done.
And you just mentioned potential opportunities for bipartisan deals to come, one or two issues where we might actually see that happening.
Well, you know, one of them that we have to do is the Farm Bill this year, right? And historically, this has been a bipartisan effort. It has become, again, more politicized, so it's kind of interesting to see how that happens. But, you know, I think there is opportunity, and we have to try to take that. And I think part of that is conversations. Look, one of the things that I've done as when I got elected in 2016, I came in when Trump came in. I played baseball with the guys. And it's through that effort that I've had Republicans reach out to me to invite me on Codell's that says, oh, you're the one who plays on the baseball team. I was one time at a Library of Congress dinner, and I had Rand Paul come up to me, to which I was surprised. He goes, oh, yeah, you're the girl who plays on the baseball team. So you really never know, but it is the ability to reach out and build those relationships, which doesn't happen as often as it should. And we have to create those opportunities to find those opportunities to work across the aisle. The other quick story I'll tell you about, my mom, about 10 years ago, had surgery. Well, this was probably like 8 years ago. She had surgery, and I had just become a member of Congress. Maybe it was like 6 years. And I was talking to the doctor, and he said to me, oh, have you gone and spoken to Larry Bouchon? And I didn't know him at the time. I said, no, I don't know him. He says, oh, he was my roommate in medical school. And he said, you should find him and see if you could work together on something. Well, as it turns out, I go on Energy and Commerce. I'm on the healthcare subcommittee. So I went out of my way to find him on the House floor. And I said, hey, you know, you were roommates with my mom's surgeon. And because of that, we worked together on maternal mental health and got a bill passed in the last Congress for the Triumph Act, right? It's really the ability to go and actually walk across the aisle to build these relationships, finding some, you know, there's a personal aspect to it, but I'm a big fan and supporter of building relationships and getting to know people. And this is something actually Kevin McCarthy did when I was first elected. He brought in the Democrats from California, and he said, hey, we might not be on the same side of the aisle, but that doesn't mean we can't work together. So I'm always looking for those opportunities.
We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately, but Congresswoman, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for listening to our conversation. We have a quick video from our sponsor, and then I will be right back with another interview. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Please enjoy the short video from our sponsor, Bank of America.
Some soldiers come back with wounds you can see, but many of us come back with wounds you can't see. I retired from the military in 2012. I spent 39 months deployed, and that surrealness of being in a combat zone, coming back into the civilian world was tough. A lot of dark years fighting off PTSD, and I had to really go outside of the scope, and I had to struggle with this notion of who I was, who I could be. Let me show you what I do to get rid of those demons. It really just started out as a hobby in the basement, making clothes for my wife. And we got a tremendous response. So my first runway was spring of 2017 for Denver Fashion Week. And it's exploded since then. We are now focused on what we need to do as a small business and growing that into something global.
Small businesses are the majority of businesses in Denver and in Colorado and nationwide. And a lot of veterans are starting small businesses. We're one of the largest lenders to the CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions in the country. And we partner with CDFIs like Colorado Enterprise Fund on our Veteran Entrepreneur Lending Program to connect veterans with affordable capital to help kickstart and grow their businesses.
The soldiers don't become fashion designers generally, but Bank of America was the one from the beginning that says, hey, we believe in what you're doing and we've created a program just for you. Let me connect you with the Colorado Enterprise Fund.
Not only is he able to get that access to capital, but we also provide a training program and a mentoring program to help him get to the next level.
It's really about, we really want you to succeed. And they've been supportive ever since. They've attended the shows. They're really a part of the journey.
It's really wonderful to see Dwayne be able to have his business just take off.
That's the fun part about my job, meeting passionate business owners like Dwayne, and we can't wait to see where Dwayne takes his business and his career.
You know what, I've had a rough journey. I've overcome some obstacles, but I love what I do now. You have the power to choose your path. You have the power to choose who you are, and you have the power to find your own switch. Turn that light on and shine.
And now, please welcome back Axios political reporter Alexi McCammon.
Hello again, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Our next guest is from the Senate, from the great state of North Carolina. He was recently appointed to be a counselor in Senate leadership and can help us talk about what to expect from Senate Republicans ahead of 2024. Please help me in welcoming Senator Thom Tillis. Hi. Thank you for doing this. It's good to see you. Well, I appreciate you doing this, and welcome to our Axios News Shapers event. I want to start, as I started with the Congresswoman before you, with the news that came out of Memphis last weekend with Tyree Nichols. I'd just like to talk to you about what you were feeling when you watched the video, if you watched it, and whether you feel differently about police reform now that you saw what happened.
Well, I was actually watching it with my wife. It was horrifying. It was a failure of those officers on the ground at every level, whether it was of the 5 of them there, at least one of them intervening at the point in time that he was handcuffed. Any one police officer should have been able to control the situation. You saw the violence that came after it. You know, I was surprised by the press by saying that we have structural problems in law enforcement. I completely reject the notion of defund the police. I'm not sure that we have structural problems in law enforcement, but we do have resource problems and training, a number of other things that law enforcement officers need. Some get it in the larger police organizations. You would have thought that it would have been in place in Memphis, but we have to work more on better training and better preparing and better supporting law enforcement. But I also worry that when you see those scenes, that some people may jump to the conclusion that majority of police officers, if in the same circumstances, would have done the same thing, and I completely disagree with that.
Do you think that federal legislation would address those issues that you're talking about, resources, training?
I think we can help. I was telling my staff the other day, I was town councilman in town of Cornelius. At that time, it probably had about 20,000 residents. We had a relatively small police force, but I was one of the councilmen that moved to provide funding for CALIA certification, which is law enforcement training that really at that time was only present in most major law enforcement organizations. We have to get the training and resources on the ground. The federal government has a role to play there, as does the state and local governments. For more training, more counselors, if you take a look at what an officer experiences over a brief time in their early career, they are exposed to horrific situations, and we need to understand they're humans, and they need the sort of support so that they're better prepared to deal with tragedies that they encounter on a daily basis.
I want to switch gears and look ahead to the 2024 presidential election. I'm sure you saw the news that former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is intending to announce her bid in mid-February. Would you like to see a robust Republican primary field in 2024?
Yeah,
Why?
I think the Republicans need to make a case to the American people. Primaries are good at giving people to elevate what they may have done at a state level or, based on their past careers, assuming some of them have public service experience. They need to build a case for the American people. I think that America's divided right now, and that we're not particularly popular as elected officials, and they want to see a change in direction, and I think a focus on the priorities that resonate with the American people. That comes out of the primary. It'll come out of the general election process.
A number of polls in the past have shown that Democratic voters would like to see an alternative to Joe Biden in 2024. Other polls have shown Democrats want to see generational change among leadership here in Washington and across the party. Should Joe Biden be the Democratic Party's nominee in 2024?
I'm going to leave that to the Democratic Party and independent voters that will support him. He wouldn't be my pick, but then again, no Democrat would be my pick. So full disclosure, I may be a little bit biased.
Should Donald Trump be the Republican Party's nominee in 2024?
I think President Trump needs to come before the American people, like others that are going to enter in the primary, and build a case. People are asking me, am I picking somebody at this point? I said, my goodness, it's February now, I guess, of 2023. I want to hear the case. I want to see the thing that resonates most with me and the priorities that I believe that I have in the U.S. Senate, and then the person who's best position will come out of the primary.
Is there anything that former President Trump could say now that would get your support?
Well, I do have to go back and say that the 4 years that the president, that I worked with the president, and I still maintain contact with him, we did a lot of good things. And thank goodness some of the things that we did were in place, particularly the economy, so that we were better prepared to deal with COVID. On policy trajectories, I had very few differences with President Trump. I think we all have our different styles and personalities, and there were some instances where I disagree with him, and I've told him that. But I do believe that he was in the White House at a time when we did very many good things, and he should run on that record.
A time when you disagreed with him?
Well, I'm not going to get into any specific disagreement. I mean, my biggest beef is the role of government. And I feel very strongly that over the last 75 years, Congress has taken the easy path when their person was in the White House to convey authority to the Article 3 branch. And some of my disagreements with this president or any president is continuing to increase the power of the Article 3 branch. And we've got to work on that. That's probably in those areas where I've had probably the greatest disagreement.
Biden and Democrats, of course, narrowly lost your state, North Carolina, in 2020 to Donald Trump. They think...
I was kind of in there too.
And you as well.
Not a year for re-election.
They think that 2024 will be different, are feeling much more hopeful that they'll be able to take North Carolina this time. What are Democrats getting wrong about your state?
Well, I think people talk about trending red or trending blue. I really do believe that North Carolina is a purple state and likely to stay that way for some time. Unaffiliated voters are either at or about to eclipse Democrats for the majority of votes. Republicans are about 30%. I think unaffiliateds are around 33%. By the next election, unaffiliated voters will be the largest voting bloc in North Carolina. So to win in North Carolina, you can't come with a far left message, you can't come with a far right message. If you come with a limited government message and a right sizing of government, you probably win, and if you don't, you'll lose.
And I'd like to get your thoughts on the Supreme Court case that I know you're familiar with, Moore versus Harper. They, of course, heard oral arguments in December. A decision is expected perhaps this spring. I'd like to get your view on whether and how it would be a good thing for North Carolina's state legislature to be able to have power over federal elections, those rules over federal elections, without operating within the state constitutional limits that could be enforced by the state Supreme Court.
Having been Speaker of the House and served in the legislature for 4 two-year terms, I like the laboratories of democracy. I like putting the power back into the states. In many respects, it's very similar to the reason why I feel strongly that we need to shift power back to the way the framers of the Constitution envisioned it in terms of the authority of the purse and the Congress. So I trust the states to weigh in, and I think that then we've got 50 different decisions to get made when states are in play versus one that we may get right or wrong.
And do you think that other states should look into the independent state legislature theory then?
I'll leave it to the legislatures. I don't swim out of my lanes.
I'd like to talk to you also about the North Carolina governor's race. Voters and Democratic strategists I talk to talk a lot about the ability for voters to potentially make history by either voting for the first Jewish governor in the Democratic candidate if he becomes the nominee, or perhaps the first black governor if Mark Robinson becomes the Republican nominee. How are you thinking about what Republicans need to do to win a seat that has been held by Democratic Governor Roy Cooper?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier. You need to understand the state, you need to understand the math. I think the person who's going to win the governor's race, and it's not clear to me who's going to be the Republican and Democrat nominee. I think on the Republican side, it will probably be hotly contested. On the Democrat side, I'm not quite sure. But at the end of the day, if either of those candidates take the bait and go too far left or too far right, the one who doesn't is the one who's going to win.
Do you think Donald Trump would be helpful for the Republican nominee?
I think he can.
Race?
I mean, President Trump was helpful to me in 2020, but there was also an area of independence between me and him on the issues and the priorities that represent North Carolina. So I think he could be. I think a lot of that depends on the dynamic of the presidential primary.
And will you be endorsing anyone in the governor's race?
I don't know. I've generally stayed out of it. I was late for this, but my first meeting was at 6:15 this morning, and it was also involved Ted Budd. That was a race where Pat McCrory, Ted Budd, I respected both of them, and because I thought for different reasons, either one of them could be a good nominee. They were friends before the primary. They were friends after the primary. But I very seldom get involved in primaries, particularly when I believe that there is more than one person that could build a rational basis for saying they're the best one to win the general. I'm all about winning general elections. And in some instances, as a Republican, you want the most conservative Republican you can get that also has a very good chance of winning a general election. Second place means nothing in politics.
Before we have to go, I'd like to just get into a conversation about the debt ceiling negotiations and fight. Of course, Republican Kevin McCarthy is meeting with President Biden to talk about negotiations and a way forward. Democrats, especially your Senate colleagues, have been warning that Republicans will not be able to get a deal done. What types of programs do you think might be cut in order to get a deal, especially when Democrats are warning that Social Security and Medicare could be on the chopping block?
Well, when both parties' starting position in negotiations is that, so take a look at this, the more than $4 trillion that we spend. When we've taken out 80% of it, how do you actually address any structural changes that are going to get the debt in line? I think they have to open the aperture and dispense with all this. I am so bored with this idea of touching Medicare means that you're going to break a promise that you've made to people who are on it, or break a promise to somebody who's going to be on it who's age 45 now, or break a promise to somebody who's going to own it when they're age 35. It's patently false. And we could talk about other entitlements. I'll just pick Medicare. I could say the same thing for Social Security. Every single discussion I've been involved in, and I've been involved in many of them over the last 8 years, and even more so over the last year, relate to tuning the dial that has a dramatic impact on our future debt, and a dramatic impact on being able to be sure that people your age, people younger than you, are going to have the same sorts of benefits, the same sorts of safety net that we've already provided today. But if we do nothing, Congress is going to be confronted with a crisis. It could be as bad as a 25% reduction in benefits of the people receiving it today, and as much as a 25% increase on the taxes to fund it forward. And so I hope that after the temperatures cool, and people become more rational, they recognize the easiest way to solve this problem is look across the full spectrum of our spending and tune the dials versus playing this political game that's being played out now, which is patently untrue. I hope that they're misinformed, and that's the position they're taking today. Because if they're not misinformed, then they're intentionally misleading the American people.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Just last question, yes or no, do you support cutting Social Security and Medicare?
Again, it's a false premise to the question. I support being able to put a Social Security and Medicare system in place that I, as a person with almost 40 years of business background, can look at the numbers and say, this is a promise we can keep. Now, let me just give you a quick example. I know you're running out of time. But really, I mean, everybody knows the life expectancy has changed dramatically since we set the eligibility date today. Is it really immoral for me to ask a 30-year-old to plan ahead and maybe have to wait 18 months longer before they receive their Social Security or Medicare benefits? Is it really wrong? Is it wrong to take a look at maybe income levels that haven't changed and say maybe there should be some additional revenues coming in to balance it and provide a safety net for people who haven't been blessed or in the same position? That's the discussion. If it boils down to a simple discussion of are you willing to cut Medicaid or are you willing to cut Social Security, it's a false premise to the question for anybody that's invested time in understanding what we need to do to fix it.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us for this conversation and joining Axios News Shapers. I wish we had more time, but that's all we have today, so thank you all for listening to us. We have one more interview after this, but I appreciate you sticking around. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Please give a warm welcome back to Axios senior politics reporter Eugene Scott.
Thank you all so much for sticking around. We're going to have our final conversation, and we hope it is as enlightening for you as these previous ones have been. I want to welcome to the stage South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace. So good to see you.
There too.
How's your day going so far?
Well, I have coffee.
Good.
So that's good.
That is a great start. So speaking of starts, this start to the Congress seems very different from how your last session started. How are you processing where the GOP is right now differently?
Well, it's certainly, it's still a challenge though. I mean, like 2 years ago, I would say the start of this session is been pretty challenging because of the issues that we're tackling. We really haven't gotten to the meat of some of the issues that we ran on, like tackling inflation, spending, the debt, and there'll be some meetings today about that, so that's a good start. But now we're in February. We're like a month behind. We were delayed getting our committees organized because of the speaker's vote, and it's a presidential election season, and so it really shortens the timeline for us to be able to work on anything that really helps people who are struggling, because people are struggling in this country. So for me, and if people have paid attention to some of the comments I've made since the start of this session, I've been pretty frustrated with the direction that we've been heading, because there's so many problems facing our country, and we've got to find a way to work together to help solve some of those problems.
What frustrates you most within the Republican Party specifically?
Well, the infighting that we have going on. I mean, we have a vote today about ousting a member of Congress from their committee. I mean, we are just delaying and distracting from what we should be working on. And, whether it's immigration, we've had 4 million people, more than that, cross the border illegally in the last 2 years. We have inflation making the cost of everything rise, from eggs to groceries to gas. I mean, I filled up the other day, it was still $3.60. 2 years ago, I filled up at like $1.89. And, and so when you look at the issues that we're facing, I mean, there are real problems in this country. Civil rights issues that are happening, cybersecurity issues, the war with Russia and Ukraine, it affects us too. I mean, there are just so many things happening in the world right now. And we're not even able to have this conversation. We're not even able to put legislation through regular order through the committee process right now, because we're still not even fully organized with our committees. That's a problem for the American people, and I want us to be able to maintain the majority. I want us to be able to win the White House 2 years from now, and the longer we take to address the pressing issues of the day, the harder it's going to be. I mean, every time I turn around, there's a fentanyl bust in South Carolina, or somebody else's child has died from a fentanyl overdose, or another police officer has been exposed to fentanyl. This stuff's coming across our border every single day. We're on track to have 150 people on the terrorist watch list cross our border this year. These are real problems, and we don't even have time to have a conversation because we're distracted by partisanship and politics right now.
Where do you stand on removing lawmakers from committees based on past comments?
Well, if we were going to be ideologically consistent, every Democrat today would vote to kick Omar off her committee, and every Republican would vote to keep her on. I mean, and that's going to be the opposite of what happens. I don't believe that up until 2 years ago, and this is a precedent that Pelosi set, this had never been done in the history of Congress. In over 200 years, this had never been done before. Issues within each of the parties, respectively, had usually been handled within the party. So Peter King, when he uttered racist comments, it was the Republican conference that decided to boot him from his committees. They made that decision. There was pressure put on George Santos this week. He was forced to resign from his committees because of the investigations going on. We've done a very good job of taking care of our own. That's always been the precedent. But now we're saying, because you said something we disagree with, that your opinion is wrong, we're now just going to arbitrarily kick you off a committee. And there's no due process in that. I've worked in civil rights issues for a long time. If there were a process with due process that gave somebody the right to have an investigation, have a hearing, have a vote handled by the ethics committee unanimously, and then brought to the floor, that's different. Okay. And that if that were the standard that both sides could agree to, then both sides should be treated that way. Instead, it feels like a vendetta, right, and it feels like it's a violation of the First Amendment. It's cancel culture. And those are things that I thought us as conservatives that we fought for. I mean, there are men and women in uniform who died for the right for anyone to say what they want to say in this country. And it's a slap in the face to the Constitution, to precedent, to tradition, and to the right to due process. People have died because they didn't get due process. And I thought those are the things that we as a country are supposed to fight for, and that's not what we're doing today.
So when you make those concerns known to Republican leadership, what kind of response do you get?
I've been called to the principal's office quite a lot. And sometimes it's the vice principal's office, and I got called in the principal's office this week, and I make those arguments, but we're all so entrenched in our own viewpoints. It's really hard to get movement. And then people are afraid of the base, and you see this on the left and the right. But I really appreciated Senator Tillis's comments earlier. It's the independents. It's those who are unaffiliated. It's those who feel that their party left them, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. But there's an element in both sides that feel like they don't have a home. And those are the majority of voters in this country. And I've seen it in my district. It's been a movement that's been happening slowly over the last couple of years, but even more so, it's been significant over the last 2 years. And I've seen it in polling. I've seen it in my town halls. But both sides are ignoring these centrists, these independents, these unaffiliated voters right now that don't agree with what both sides are doing. They don't agree with what Pelosi did 2 years ago, kicking Green and Gosar off their committees. And they're not going to agree with this, kicking Omar off. All this is a tit-for-tat fight. And independent voters, the majority of voters in my district, independents outnumber Republicans by double digits. Republicans outnumber Democrats. But, those voices aren't really, they're being lost in all of this. And both sides are ignoring what the future, what it is today, and what the future is certainly trending toward more of.
What's the one issue you have found independents to be focused on that neither party is paying as much attention to as needs to be?
Abortion is one of those issues. So in my district, I'm in a swing district, even though it's South Carolina, and generally the state is bright red, but not the low country. It's deeply purple, where independents outnumber Republicans. But in my election, for the first time that I've ever seen in our polling, inflation was number one. So economic issues, I think whether you're Republican, Democrat, or independent, most people feel like they're fiscally conservative. They don't want their taxes to go up. They don't want the government to waste their money. They want it to be spent and invested efficiently. But the number two issue in my district is abortion. And it was that way, really, it'd never been that way until after Roe. And that's an issue where I take both sides, honestly, because they're entrenched again with the fringes. They're going to the far right and the far left on this issue and not talking to the masses in America. About 80% of the people in our country and in my district are willing to find some middle ground. I mean, I can't even bring up the topic of birth control. And then if I do, these pro-life groups, well, they'll just, cut me out of the conversation because I brought up the pill. I'm sorry, if you really want to get serious about reducing the number of abortions in this country, then let's have a serious conversation about access to birth control. Fewer pregnancies mean fewer abortions. That's basic math. And in the state of South Carolina, for example, and we're not unlike in many other states, but we have entire counties in rural areas that don't have a single OBGYN doctor. So I would think the pill wouldn't be a controversial thing, or contraception or emergency plan B. If you're raped, my God, you should have access to those things. But apparently that's too much compromise, and that's too controversial, and I get attacked for it. And it's mind-boggling. I'm bringing up rape and incest. I was raped as a teenager. Apparently that's too much compromise, and that's too controversial. And I just can't believe that's where we are today in 2023. And if we don't, as a party, listen to the voices that are out there, Republican, Democrat, and Independent, 80% of our country on this issue, Republicans will continue to lose elections. We lost in the midterm cycle because of this issue. We also lost more seats than we should have because we nominated people that couldn't win general elections. And you got to listen to these people. I have town halls every week. I poll, we do surveys, we get feedback, we take phone calls and emails, because I want to listen to the people that I represent. And it's a major issue right now.
One area Republicans are really struggling in is winning women voters. What do you think can be done beyond abortion to get back this important voting bloc?
Well, they care right now about that issue. That is their number one issue, is finding some common ground on that. That's one way that we have to look at. There are regulations in this country, at least in the state by state, where we're talking about women who work and getting child care, where we have so many regulations. There's such a shortage of child care workers. Moms can't get their kids into a program to have their kids watch while they're at work, for example. In the state of South Carolina, there's no reciprocation. If you're qualified to do child care in one state, that certification isn't reciprocal in the state of South Carolina. So let's just say you're an Army spouse or a military spouse, and you were stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then you get stationed at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and you want to work in child care. Well, that certification isn't reciprocal. So it's just, our regulations really prohibit us from being better, stronger, more in so many ways, and that's just another example.
What's an area of compromise that you've noticed that leaves you optimistic? Some issue that someone on the other side of the aisle prioritizes as much as you do that you're looking forward to addressing in this?
Cybersecurity.
Okay.
I'm a nerd. Okay. I taught myself to code in college and did some limited coding in my early 20s. I knew about 6 different programming languages at one point in my early 20s. Don't ask me to do it now. Okay. It'd be a disaster. But Ro Khanna and I did a lot of cybersecurity work in the last session. I'll be the subcommittee chairman of Cyber, Tech, and Innovation on Oversight. And that is a place, even on oversight, where you have one side has the Freedom Caucus and then the other side has the Squad. That's been a place where Ro and I have worked. Our last bill was a quantum computing bill, and it passed unanimously out of oversight and was signed into law by the President of the United States in December. So that gives me, if we can get to that point where we're having subcommittee hearings on substantive issues, that's a place where I know we can work together.
Awesome. 2024, speaking of presidents, what are you thinking? I mean, there's big news coming out of South Carolina that one of your fellow party members, Nikki Haley, could be launching a campaign in the next few weeks.
She is. I think it's February 15th.
That's
She'll launch it out of my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina in 2 weeks. It's exciting to see the leadership that's coming out of South Carolina. And not only is it coming out of South Carolina, but it's coming out of the 1st Congressional District in South Carolina, which is my home, the area that I represent. And it's very, very exciting to see the leadership that's on the table in 2024.
Will you be at the launch?
I don't know if I'm in town yet. I am looking at my schedule. We are getting invited, so we should get that invitation today. And so I'm excited to see, am I going to be here? I know that I have a national security conference around that time out of state, so I don't know if the timing will work, but I would love to be there if I could.
Not ready to make an endorsement yet?
We're looking at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do Republicans need to do to win back the White House in 2024?
There are a couple of things. We need to get real and smart on budget reform in this country. If we're going to say we're fiscally conservative, if we're limited government leaders, the last time a Republican balanced the budget was in 1970 under President Richard Nixon. We can't pay lip service to this issue anymore. We have $31 trillion in debt. It's been caused by both sides of the aisle. Under the previous administration, they drew up the deficit by $8 trillion. Right now, under this administration, we're at $5 trillion 2 years in. This is an untenable place. We need leadership on budget reform and fiscal policy, and that is a very complicated issue. It is not going to be done overnight. I would love to see it done in 5 years. It's not tenable given the debt situation that we have, but have a 10-year plan. What does that look like? How do we address Social Security? We don't want to cut Social Security, but I know in my generation, I'm 45, I am just assuming I'm not going to have it.
Right.
And so, what do we do for future generations so that they can prepare for what that may or may not look like? And so addressing those things in a valid way. Healthcare is another issue that matters. Every time government gets involved with regulations in any industry, including healthcare, the cost to the consumers and small businesses always goes up. This has been no different. How are we going to cut healthcare costs? And then also women's issues. And I've had some of these conversations with people in leadership positions much higher than my own. But my message to those who are going to be running for president in 2024, don't be assholes to women. Because that's what we're doing right now. And to cut people out because they want to talk about birth control, because they want to talk about how we balance women's rights and the right to life. There's a way to do that. It wasn't long ago when leaders out of my state filed a bill in the Senate having a 20-week gestational limitation. 20 weeks. Right. Why is that so controversial now? It's 20 weeks with exceptions for rape and incest, which might even be more to the left of what most people are comfortable with. But why is that? Why can't we not have that conversation now? And if we don't get right on this issue and show some compassion toward women who've been in really bad spots, who are, being raped, I will tell you, and I'll tear up thinking about it, it's the trauma of a lifetime. Right. You don't get over that. Right. Now, you can mask it, you can address it. It's a physical, it's an emotional, it's a mental issue. And for me, and I know this personally, it lasts a lifetime. It doesn't go away. And so how do we show that compassion to the 10-year-old girl, as rare as it is, it happens, who's raped by her father? How are you going to show her compassion and her family when that happens? And we just want to, a lot of folks just want to turn their backs on women, bury their heads in the sand, and pretend this stuff doesn't exist. And it does. And I know that these conversations are uncomfortable, and I know that you're going to get attacked for it, but we should never attack women and girls who've been raped. And that's precisely what the far right does. Well, when a woman like myself brings the issue up, and it's wrong, and we're not going to win over. We're not going to win the hearts and minds of women if we continue to act this way.
I'm old enough to remember when compassionate conservatism was a high value of the GOP base. Do you think that's still a priority? And if not, what happened?
I see a lot of hypocrisy right now. And it's on constitutional issues. I thought that we were the ones that opposed cancel culture. We didn't like it when the left canceled us on social media. We didn't like it when the FBI tried to hide and bury stories days before an election. We don't like cancel culture, but all of a sudden today, cancel culture is okay because we're in the majority. No, it's not. It's not okay. And we have to be better than the last guy. Americans don't trust Congress. They don't trust the presidency. They don't trust the White House. In order to gain that trust back, we have to be better. We have to hold ourselves to a much higher standard than we hold the American people. Look at the classified document debacle. If you're an army or military soldier and you're caught with classified information, your ass is going to jail. Okay? You don't get to just, talk your way out of it. You're going to the brig, right? I mean, you're being court-martialed and you're going to prison for a while. And so we, as elected officials, have to hold ourselves to a much higher standard than we hold anybody else in this country. And we're not doing that right now.
Well, Congresswoman, I could talk to you about so many more issues. I'm really glad you took time from your day to come join us at our first News Shapers, and I hope you come back.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
all of you all for coming. It's been great having all of these lawmakers with us. And most importantly, I want to thank our sponsor, Bank of America, for making this happen. I hope you all follow us on Twitter at Axios, and see you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.